All right. Feel free to jump in if you get anything, but I'm just going to take that as we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, so today we're going to talk about some fire behavior topics. Again, size up smoke reading. We do a pretty good job with talking about size ups. Today we're going to get a little bit more in depth on not just saying what we're seeing, but actually kind of understanding what that smoke and flame is telling us, and kind of looking beyond that and kind of understanding where things are going to progress and move to. Flow paths, we're going to hit on that quite a bit. The actual fire behavior itself, what is the fire doing? How is it growing? What is it looking for? Talk about quick hits, how we do them properly, and some of the negative sides on what can be bad if we do something incorrectly and how that can hurt us. Cooling and advancing, again, kind of going back to some old school conversations that we have or people have been told is, you never spray smoke, you never do some things, you'd only spray when you see fire. Really kind of talking about some of this black fire as some of these unburned products of combustion are basically black fire. So kind of talking about when it might be appropriate to do some of these things that we might have been told not to do in the past. And then lastly, we'll just talk a little bit about some building types and construction. That's going to be a pretty quick one, and I know I've got quite a few pretty well-versed people in here on that, so feel free to jump in and talk on those as well. I'll give you guys an opportunity to really talk about some of the building types that we have in our area and some of the hazards that they propose or that really they would really pose to us. And I'll just kind of talk real briefly too. There are YouTube videos on here. I know the video quality as it comes through this might be a little bit choppy. I didn't really get too many complaints about it last night, but the audio should be just fine, and you should get pretty good video on it. I will share this whole presentation later, so if you want to go to any of the links later, you'll feel free to go back and watch any of these videos. Most of them are pretty short, to the point, and I thought they covered the topic pretty well. So first thing that we want to talk about is just a size up. We get on scene and we go through our size up. We want to talk about the building. We want to talk about the problem. We want to talk about what we're going to do with that problem. That's the very generic, basic, what a size up would be. But one of those things that we talk about is what the problem is. And that problem is going to be a fire, generally, is what we're generally sizing up. But really, we want to go beyond, the working fire, the incipient fire. We need to know, what type of fire do we have? Is it just starting to get going? Is it fully developed? Is it still growing? Or is it in a decay phase of that fire? And that does matter. It matters because how I enter that building, if it's in a decay phase, and it's maybe in a decay phase because it's just oxygen limited, now I walk in with an open door and now I'm no longer in a decay phase. So just understanding some of the hazards and conditions that come with those fire conditions is important. We also want to start seeing if we can't figure out where that fire is located. And the smoke might be able to tell us. Seeing the actual flames is going to help us, and we're going to talk about some more things on what we can do to figure out where it is. We're also going to try to figure out where it's going and how we're going to send our crews, and also how much water we need. Again, bigger fires might need bigger water. We're going to start to talk about those 2.5s or a deck gun on some of these very large, well-involved fires. The consideration on, do we need to vent? Is it a vent-limited fire? We can't really vent our way out of a fire, but maybe at some point there's enough smoke and gases and superheated things up in an attic space or up on an upper level. Do we need to open windows? Do we need to put a vent hole? Do we need to do something? It might not be the first thing we do, but it might be something that needs to be done, especially even after cooling, to start to get some of those products of combustion out of there to help us do surges. And then we also want to talk about, what flow paths are already established. Does the front door open? Do I have smoke coming out and cool air going in? Just trying to identify what the fire is already doing, and then understanding where it's going to want to go due to what it's already doing, and then due to what we're actually going to start doing to that fire in that building as well. So just kind of taking some general looks on that size up, going further in than that basic look at the building, what type of building, what size, where's the fire, and what are you going to do? Really kind of start to think a little bit more about what is that fire telling you. So let's see, I'm just going to kind of run through some people on here. Blaine, you're up at the top of my screen. So that top left picture on this screen, what kind of a fire condition can you believe that you would have on that?
Well, top left, we'd definitely be having, looks like an airport hangar fire. Definitely probably heavy smoke, of course. I don't know if I can see any flames actually in there, but definitely a lot of toxics burning top left.
Yeah, and so you're already saying, I don't see the flames, but man, is there a ton of product of combustion coming out of there, right?
Yep.
So that's really telling us some clues. You know, we have a ton of heat, a ton of fuel, and we probably just don't have enough oxygen to really support huge flames coming out of there. Because if you have a little bit more oxygen on there, you're going to have huge flames coming out of the top of that.
Yep.
So really, we got a very well involved fire, pretty advanced, a lot of heat, a lot of fuel, and we're figuring all this out without even seeing any flames, right?
Yep.
We're kind of using our clues to what's going on there, even without flames. That was good. Let's see, Baker, you want to take the top right?
Yeah, here just looks couple of things to look at. It looks like it's a townhome, but then it's, you know, fully evolved garage, but then it's more of the tuck under style. So you're looking at it venting itself back into the home on the living quarters, and it running from there and then up into the attic.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one, it's very well involved, right? It's got plenty of oxygen, it's got plenty of vent, plenty of fuel, well advanced fire in that garage. And like you said, it's just going to want to keep spreading now. It's just going to find that next path, and we're going to have to cool it down, especially with being a tuck under. You got the worries about it going up into that upper levels. You got attic spaces above. You can kind of see it's already kind of running that eave a little bit to the delta end. So again, this one's just going to want to keep growing on you. It's not slowing down at all. Very well involved. Let's see. Jerry, you want to take the bottom left?
I would if I could see it. I'm having technical difficulties here.
Oh, no worries, no worries. We can move on. Who do you want to pick?
This one.
We can set it down to. What's that?
Which one did you want?
Oh, the bottom left.
I can't see. What do we got there? A vented fire? Is that flames showing from a lower level?
So it's kind of hard to see. You're probably looking at a smaller screen, but it's a garage fire, but it's already pretty much burnt off the whole roof and everything, and it's kind of dying down a little bit and already been knocked down a little.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't see it very well in the little picture, but I'm still fighting on my phone here to get the video back up and running. It takes some drive, so it cut it out.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, a little bit on that one is it's not the well-involved fire. It's probably already burned up a lot of the fuel in that garage. The roof's already gone. It's well vented, has plenty of oxygen, plenty of vent on it, but the fuel might be already burnt up. Big things on this one is, you know, if you roll up on scene and it's already at that point, we're already pretty much assuming it's in that decay phase. But some of that smoke and conditions like that might be hiding some of the extension to the residence or something else. So really don't just start to get easy because it's not the turbulent black smoke or anything else coming out of there. We still need to be cautious that something might be hidden. Something that was brought up last night is you don't know what else is in that garage. You could have cans of gas or whatever else in there, still have plenty of heat and things inside of that garage that can still kick off a pretty good fire if there's a new fuel source that we're not seeing. So just being mindful on that is don't get complacent. Kirk, you want to take the bottom middle? All right, we'll go to Mark. Mark, you want to take the bottom middle? Oh, there he is. Never mind. Kirk jumped in.
Wrong mute button here. I got
it happens.
Looks to be residential. Flame and smoke coming out the window. Probably a room and contents at this time. Vent limited. and hopefully that's a quick hit.
Sure. So we're kind of hoping that, you know, it's probably room and contents. You really can't tell on that one. It's actually more garage than a window. Kind of hard to see on that picture, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
Room and contents, but it's a bigger room because it's a garage. So higher fuel load, whatever else. But yes, we are still going to be able to hit that from exterior stream and then go in and try to cut it off and make sure that it hasn't advanced into the residence at all. So again, not as dangerous as maybe that one on the top right. Dangerous in the sense that we don't have living quarters above it. We don't have that fuel load above. We have an attic space though, and if that sheetrock starts to fail, you're going to start running that attic space. Or if there isn't any sheetrock, some of the older Ramblers might not have an enclosed attached garage. So just knowing the construction and your fuel loads are going to start to tell you what kind of fire you're dealing with there and where it's going to want to go. Mark, now I don't want to steal it away from you because I said you were next. You can take the bottom right.
All right, that one looks like either possibly fire out or fire at the beginning, light smoke. Looks like we're probably going to have to go in and try to find it. See where it's at.
Absolutely.
So it looks like fairly light smoke.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great point. When you have light smoke like that, it could be there at the very end phase or the very beginning phase. And with that light of smoke, it might be very difficult to find. It might be in a concealed space. It might be, you know, it could be a furnace motor. Who knows? Maybe there's just a really, really dusty filter. But we're going to have to go find it. And that's going to be the tough thing. The big thing on that is not getting complacent, because if it's hidden and we go inside and we start looking, you're losing that outside view. So again, having command keep an eye on those smoke conditions from the outside is really going to be able to tell you if things are progressing or staying the same or getting better. So again, not losing our complacency on a fire like that is going to be important. So good call on that. So a little bit about smoke reading. Really, when you're looking at the smoke, you want to see, you know, the color, the volume, the density of it, and then the velocity. All of those different components are going to tell you what's going on. A little bit we talked about last night, the color changes can sometimes tell you what's involved. So when you have that really thick, black, nasty smoke, a lot of the times that's telling you it's a contents fire. You got a lot of the plastics and synthetics inside of a building that are burning, that are really letting off that really nasty black smoke. We've generally been able to say, you know, if it's that grayer, brownish type smoke, it's maybe more structural components that are burning, more wood, siding, things like that are actually burning. The more and more that building materials start to get mixed with synthetic and whatever else, the harder that actually becomes to tell. But that's kind of been the general terms, at least in the past. But again, as we have building materials change and contents change, you know, those smoke colors and things are going to change as well, and might not always hold true for us. The locations on them are going to tell you where it's going, where it's moving the fastest is generally going to tell you where that fire is. So if you have the fastest moving column of smoke, that's generally going to tell you where your heat is pushing from the most, which is going to tell you generally where that fire is located. We also talk a little bit about the puffing of the smoke, so or the movement of it. If you look on the top left, you have everything venting out at the top of the garage. On the bottom half, you still have air and everything going in. Granted, we are hitting this with a hose. We're knocking it down, so we are having an effect on this. But we're still able to see that there is a vent established where we're still getting all of our exhaust products out up high, and we still have cool air going in down low. That's really kind of telling us what's happening and where that smoke is moving, and if we stopped fighting that fire, where the fire would want to go. When you look on the top right, that whole attic space is just charged with smoke. We've got a ton of pressure built up. Clearly there is a well-involved attic fire. We just don't have enough vent on it to actually establish one good column. So you can kind of see that glow on the Bravo end. That's probably the only spot that's burned through that is really telling us where that fire is located. we're going to be able to tell that that whole attic space is just charged and heated. So if it does vent at any point, that whole attic space is really going to want to just take off on us. And you can tell because it's pushing smoke through that entire space. So it's all full and charged of smoke. The one down low on the left, you can really see that that whole doorway is almost being used as a vent. There's very little area of it being used as an inlet. And to me, that gets worrisome because if you're literally filling the whole ceiling to floor with your vent, that's a very hot fire that has a lot of product of combustion that it's pushing out of there. And it's probably very close to being flashover. And anybody that was on that fire knows that the flames did eventually come right out where that column of smoke was. Where you start to get that auto ignition of that smoke as it mixes with the oxygen outside. On the one on the bottom right, it's a little bit lazier smoke. It is still filling in that attic space. It's a little bit more brown, so you got more structural components that might be burning, which makes sense because this was a live burn, so there's really not any contents inside to really give that synthetic black smoke. But it's burning well. You can't really see it too clearly, but there's flames on the front side, and on the back side, it still has enough pressure building that it is pushing smoke and filtering it through the attic space and pushing it out that back side. So it would eventually establish a flow path there, but it's being lazy right now. It's not moving very fast because it's already established somewhere else. I'll play a little video on smoke reading here.
Welcome to a short class on size up and how to read smoke. In this video, we're going to talk about fire behavior and some of the techniques that you can use that will not only enhance your safety, but allow you to make better tactical decisions while operating in the fire ground. Here are some tips that can help you locate the seat of the fire. First, look for the fastest moving smoke venting from similar size openings. Another technique is to look for the tallest smoke column. You can also look for black, thin, fast-moving smoke. Taking a look at this structure, compare the smoke venting from similar size openings, such as windows, doors, and the soffit and eave line of the roof. Where do you see the fastest moving smoke? How about the tallest smoke column? Can you see the thin, black, fast-moving smoke venting from the hole in the roof? The steam conversion venting from the same hole is an indicator that attack crews are making a good push and are knocking down the fire. It's important for firefighters to recognize the warning signs of hostile fire events, such as flashovers, backdrafts, smoke explosions, and rapid fire spread. Let's take a look at the warning signs of flashover. They include turbulent smoke, which is heat pushed and ready to ignite. Another indicator is rollover, which is licks of flame that can be visible in the smoke. Vent point ignition is when the smoke reaches its right mixture with air and ignites. Dense zero visibility smoke is dangerous because of the amount of fuel present. Firefighters need to increase their situational awareness so they can identify these warning signs before they occur. You might not be able to prevent a hostile fire event from occurring. You just don't want to become part of the event. Here, firefighters are setting up for their attack, but are not recognizing the changing fire conditions. Can you see the turbulent smoke flow venting from the doorway? The key is to be proactive. Here, firefighters are caught off guard, placing them in a compromised position, forcing them to react and play catch-up. Be careful of porch or roof overhangs, which can mask turbulent smoke flow. In reduced visibility and up close, it can be difficult to identify. Remember also that ventilation, both natural and mechanical, can induce flashovers. Let's take a look at what flashover looks like from the inside. Here we have a normal room with modern furnishings. As the fire grows and develops, it radiates heat out to the ceiling, walls, and surrounding furnishings. When they can no longer absorb any more heat, they radiate that energy back into the center of the room in what's known as retroreflective radiant heat energy, also known as thermal radiation heat feedback. This further intensifies conditions in the room, causing the surrounding materials to off-gas until the point where they all reach their ignition temperature and flashover occurs. Not only are conditions in the fire room unsurvivable at this point, but as the fire vents out the doorway, adjacent rooms will quickly become untenable as well. Proper stream application can control or even prevent flashover. Let's take a look at the penciling technique. Observe the firefighter in the center of the room. Using a straight or solid stream and directing short bursts toward the ceiling, you can cool the fire gases below their ignition temperature without disrupting the thermal layering. You'll notice after stream application that the flashover has been suppressed and conditions are lightening up to the point where firefighters can start to get out of a crouching position and sit upright. Let's look at some warning signs for a backdraft. Be on guard when you encounter tightly sealed or well-insulated buildings. Be watchful for windows that are smoke-stained. Yellowish-gray smoke is an indicator that high heat is present, making conditions ripe for a backdraft. Use caution when you encounter a lot of smoke in a specific area and little or no visible fire. Backdrafts can be extremely violent, but there are some safety precautions you can take that will help you avoid being seriously injured or worse. First, always wear your full protective equipment, including SCBA. Second, never position directly in front of a potential vent, such as windows, doors, or breaches in the building that the blast wave could vent from. Smoke explosions can occur during growing or developing fires. Watch out for an increase in smoke density or thickness, as well as fire gases getting trapped in void spaces. Notice that the smoke venting from this structure is volume pushed, very thick, and low velocity. Once a flame is introduced, there's a pop of the smoke, which can be classified as a smoke explosion. Regardless of how you define it, be careful, because one hostile fire event can lead to another. Always watch out for changing smoke conditions. Looking at the same location shortly afterwards, you'll notice that the smoke is now changing to turbulent flow. This leads to flashover and a continuous burn. Once flashover occurs, you can have rapid fire spread. One way to predict rapid fire spread is to look for fast-moving smoke in hallways, stairwells, and on the outside. Here we have a two-story multifamily apartment building with fire involving one unit on the first floor. Compartment 1 on the right is rapidly approaching flashover. Take a look at the direction and travel of smoke flow. Where the smoke goes, soak in the fire, and this can help you predict the path of fire spread. As compartment 1 flashes over, compartment 2 on the left is showing turbulent smoke through the broken windows. The fire is now auto-extending to the second floor balcony, basically following the same path as the smoke. As compartment 2 flashes over, the fire rapidly intensifies. The The school of thought is to use large lines when faced with a large body of fire. But if you're working with a smaller hand line with a large flow fog nozzle, don't lose composure, because you can still safely knock down a large body of fire from the outside by using a narrow to medium range fog pattern. This can give you greater steam conversion and a faster extinguishment over a larger area. For safety reasons, only employ this tactic when you're on the outside and not in the room that's involved. When greater reach and penetration is needed, you can switch back to a straight stream. Rapid fire spread can trap firefighters, so always have a secondary means of egress. Notice the turbulent smoke flow venting from the 2 windows on the 2nd floor. This firefighter was lucky to escape. This incident occurred in Toronto, Canada in 2006 and trapped 5 firefighters. Fortunately, all were able to make it out alive. Black fire is a slang term and is used to describe smoke when volume, velocity, density, and color are at their worst. When you see it, don't be overly aggressive, because no one will be alive in that room or compartment. Take a look at the smoke and remember what you see. There's a lot of it. It's black, thick, and fast moving. Basically, the smoke is acting just like flames. You may not be able to prevent a hostile fire event, just don't become part of it. Remember these safety tips. Vent, high to release heat. Quench, or cool it down. Flank, and don't be directly in front of the vent. I want to give special thanks to Dave Dotson, the originator and author of the Art of Reading Smoke program. As Dave is well known for saying, don't just be safe, make it safe.
All right, I thought he had some pretty good examples on there on just some of those changing conditions and how you can kind of see how they're going to happen. A lot of times when we see those black turbulent smoke, that's really where the flames are going to start to follow. That fast moving smoke is really going to show us where those flames are going to go. And that's why we need to be aware. If we see that black fast moving smoke, that's not an environment to run into. It's probably worth cooling that environment down before we go into, because you're potentially going to run into a flashover or a rollover type condition. And if you wait for those flames to show, you've waited too long. So really just making sure that we're noting what the conditions are from the outside and making good tactical decisions about how to handle that to make it a safe environment for us and for any potential victims on the inside. All right, after going through all that stuff, we got a couple examples of just some smoke reading stuff. So I'll allow, let's see, Chief, you want to go ahead and take this one? You want to read the questions through here on this example?
You bet. Where's fire on this one? It looks like it's on the 1st floor in the occupancy somewhere in there, probably nearer to the door. Not an advanced fire yet, but it looks like it's in a little bit longer, a little bit deeper than the incipient stage. Maybe a chair starting up or a garbage can or something like that. The way it's venting, it looks like it's going to continue to come out that door as long as we leave that door open. However, I can't see the rear of the building, which I'd like to get eyes on that one. So as long as we leave that vent open, it's going to continue to draw it that way. And as soon as we go in, we're going to block that vent opening, and also obstruct that flow path, at least initially.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great way of reading it. So you can already tell it's established. You've got that bilateral movement, most likely at that front door. It's already vented from there. It's more than likely on that 1st floor, just with how the smoke is showing and presenting itself from what we can see. And if we make entry through there, that should be our best bet. And like you said, it's probably a little bit more than just the incipient, but it's not a super well involved quite yet. So very good. Let's see, James, you want to go ahead and take this one?
Okay, it's a little bit more developed fire because we got smoke coming out the main level and the second level. Looks like there's more turbulent, darker black smoke coming from the farthest window on the left of the second level. Looks like the fire is traveling up into the second level now. And like Chief was saying, if we go in that main door, we have to make sure that we close it or limit the flow from that also to prevent the spread from continuing.
Yeah, it's a great reading on it. You know, you can see it's venting pretty well from that that Bravo N second floor window on the Alpha side. It's pretty well established through that one. That's your thickest, fastest column of smoke. So that's probably where your fire is located. It's probably going to stay through there. If that door was closed when we first got on scene, us opening it might even kick that off with some flames. You might actually see some flames just by opening the door. But since it's already open, like you said, if you can close it at all, limit some of that oxygen coming in, that's really just going to help slow that process of that fire down. So that's a good note. Let's see. Jeff John, you want to go ahead and take this one?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you.
I would say, let's see, where's the fire? It's going to be in one of those bedrooms upstairs, right window, probably extended possibly to the next bedroom for sure, upstairs. Room of content for sure, not heavy smoke down the hallway coming out those windows. Yeah, how advanced is it? Possibly the second bedroom's on fire. And where will it go? If it's not in that second one, it's going to keep spreading on that second floor. It's not hit the attic yet. And entering, if that door was shut, like you said, when we open that door to go up the stairs, I think maybe that second one would flash. Second window, if it doesn't, by the time you get up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd say we have a second floor fire. For sure, one room, if not two.
Yeah, and like you said, it's probably going to be two pretty quick, right? With that heavy black smoke coming out of there and how much flame there is. So, and I like how you said too, it's probably not in the attic yet. We're not getting any signs of it being in the attic, but with those flames coming out and hitting that eave line, it's pretty quickly going to get in there, right? Even if the sheetrock doesn't fail inside of that room, it's got the other path where if it starts to go through the exterior.
Yeah, probably had open bedroom doors.
Yep, open bedroom doors. It's going to allow that fire to kind of travel throughout there. So to me, this is a great candidate for if you can just knock that flame back into that room, cool it down a little bit before even making entry. To me, again, generally we know where the staircase should be, and we're hoping that it shouldn't be too long, but you don't really know the conditions on the inside on how quick it'll take us to get upstairs. So anytime that you can knock some flames back in, cool down that environment, it gives you that time to get in there and not really allow those flames from the exterior to run up and into the attic and then start to really get ahead of you. So cooling that down before you even make an entry is going to be a huge component to that. And like Chief was saying earlier too, we don't really know what's going on the backside. If we had wind blowing from a certain direction, or maybe a window fails on the other end of this building, and wind starts blowing in, we could really flash this over really fast. So again, getting that 360, understanding our environment, where the wind's blowing from, how that's going to affect everything, it's going to play a role in all this as well. And seeing if you do a 360 and all the windows are cracked and ready to break and fall out on that backside, that's also going to kind of give you some clues that a new flow path could be established pretty quickly, allowing more vent and oxygen to come in. So I think it's important to kind of note that on a 360 on how that's going to progress.
Chief, can I make a comment?
Yep.
Now, we've been watching this as it progresses, keeping in mind that we still have evidence of fire on first floor. So if we do go in, you know, our focus seems to be get up to the second floor, but make sure that on our way in, we take a good look around first floor, make sure there's nothing that's going to cut us off on our way up the stairs.
That's a great point. And we actually have some videos a little bit later on that kind of show, I don't want to necessarily say, you know, some smoke conditions that would fool you, but, you know, honestly, if I showed up on scene and I saw some of the later smoke conditions, I would assume, oh yeah, the fire's on the second floor, and later to find out it actually was a fire on the first floor. So keeping that in mind and really doing that good investigation as you're going through, doing a good sweep with the tick, checking your smoke and heat flame, all that stuff on the first floor before advancing to that upper level is going to be important. And also even getting a second line in to protect your stairway for egress is going to be important. And throwing ground ladders to those upper levels is going to be important because we don't want to cut ourselves off and get in trouble. So that's a great point to make on this. Let's see. John, you want to go ahead and just take this one?
Yeah. Again, the significant difference here is we've got the heavy smoke push on first with evidence of extension up to the second, but it appears the heaviest body of fire that we're going to encounter will be on the first floor. And again, as it starts to fill the vent opening at the front door, it may raise some questions as to whether that's our best point of entry. We certainly, if we do go in that door, we want to stay low. We want to keep the nozzle closed. We don't want to start opening up too soon and block that vent. We do have push up into the second floor, but right now, if it's going to flash, it looks like it's going to happen on first. And if it does flash first, then there's a pretty good chance we'll have rapid extension into the second level.
Yep, absolutely. I think you definitely hit the head on that one. And seeing those lower amounts of smoke coming from those windows on the upper level would almost tell me it's trying to go through there, but maybe there's a blocked door, maybe, you know, whatever that is, because generally we'd assume that the smoke and flame and heat is going to want to travel up, right? It's usually going to want to take that path. If there's a door or whatever that's about to fail, you know, you could potentially see that smoke condition might change rapidly in those rooms upstairs, just because we would generally assume that that's the direction it's going to want to go. So that's a great point that is likely on the first floor, but, you know, you could see some rapid changes if we're not starting to cool that environment. Let's see. Jonathan, it looks like your mic is open, so why don't you go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, and you called John before. I thought you were talking to me.
You know what? I should have specified. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Looks like we got heavy smoke conditions coming out of the alpha side on the garage. Appears to be front door as well as open. It looks like we got some smoke coming from there as well. So I'd take the initial attack line probably through that front door on the alpha side.
Sure. So yeah, we can kind of tell it's probably in that garage, right? It's to have that much fast moving smoke come pushing through there. That's probably a very hot, well-involved fire in that garage. It might be snuffing itself out by now. To see some of that smoke condition coming from the front door tells me it's maybe already breached, and maybe that's why it's gotten so hot in there. It's still getting some vent and some oxygen. But some big things to think about when we talk about an attached garage fire. If we don't have any signs that it's in the residence, we should try to take an approach either through the garage door or a service door from the exterior. And again, just limiting exposing that residence to any smoke and heat is going to be beneficial. Sometimes we just kind of get sucked into the fact that we go through the front door. I'm not saying I'd be wrong on this one because we're already getting smoke conditions from the front door, so maybe that is the right choice.
Yeah, but there's probably no service doors on those townhouses.
Nope, no service doors on this one, so you can't boot a outside door to get in. So
yes,
you could take a Halligan and pop that garage door open, maybe pop some wheels off the tracks, and maybe try to get in that way and at least cool it down before doing anything, or hopefully a saw gets on scene. We go ahead and cut that garage door open and then make entry through there. But you're absolutely right. We might not have the option to do that.
Yeah, you're making a door.
Yep. So, but again, reading this scenario, if that front door was shut and I didn't have any signs of smoke coming from that front door, I would try to get another access point rather than go through the residence. I still need to get in the residence. I still want to ensure that we're not getting fire spread through that residence and we're protecting anybody that would be in there. But if my first line goes through and opens that service door, I'm just allowing a lot of that product of combustion into the residence, causing a lot of damage that might be unnecessary. So just being mindful of that and trying to figure out your best approach on this might be a good one as well.
And again, Chief, yeah, this is a fire that wants to vent itself really bad, and I think coordinating positioning an attack line and get that ventilation, let that thing open up and really let it out before we breach that service door or resident door, because it definitely wants to come out this way. So what it needs is a bigger opening. So I'd say ventilation first. With an attack line ready as soon as we've got ventilation fully open.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime that we're going to start venting on this, it's going to come right to you because you can see the smoke condition on this is just telling you I want to burn. That this is going to be a hot, fast fire once it gets enough oxygen. So that's a great point. Is maybe allow that vent to happen first, because if we just try to go in right away and start spraying, we might be doing more damage to ourselves than good. So again, allowing it to kind of find its path and then cool it down is going to be a good bet too. Let's see, Bob, you want to go ahead and take this one?
So it looks like we've got a fire on the second floor, probably in that left bedroom. Possibly a little bit of extension down the hall and into the other bedroom on the right side. Fairly light smoke in that right bedroom right now. So fire is going to extend into possibly into the attic through the eaves there. And again, as I said before, into the second bedroom up there. It doesn't look like there's any smoke or anything coming out of the front door at this time. So appears to be mainly on that second floor. And again, probably a direct attack through that front door and up the stairs. Looks like it's already vented in both windows. So our venting has taken place. We probably can push it right out of that second room.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing that we're seeing there is there's no smoke coming out of that front door on the first floor. So we're knowing that that's a good inlet. We're not getting any products of combustion coming out. It's a nice, safe way to make entry for us.
Question?
You got smoke on the Charlie side.
Yeah, we got heavy smoke on the Charlie.
Yep. So I kind of tucked that in there and hit it a little bit just to make us have to look a little bit. But
yeah, there's something definitely going on up on that second floor.
And that's really wanted to kind of have that in there just so we had that little pause, because we need to have that thought on, all right, what's going on there? Is that coming from an attic space? Is that coming from another window? Whatever that is, it's more pushed smoke. It's not the fast moving turbulent smoke that you have coming out of the front. Obviously the fire is in the front right there, but it is showing me signs that something is going on. And again, that's why we do 360s, because we don't know all the answers just from that front side view.
And being a center unit in what appears to be a multiple unit townhouse, be difficult probably to get to that backside depending on the type of townhouse unit it is. But
absolutely,
I think your attack is still going to be the same. But yeah, it looks like you that's possibly extended into a room on the backside of the house. So yeah, you're probably going to hit fire before you hit that bedroom on the left.
Something to think about, and we don't really talk about this at all, but with what would appear to be pretty no conditions at all, no smoke conditions on the first floor, right? Because the front door is open, I don't have any smoke coming out. There would be nothing wrong if that first initial crew went through that front door. There should be a patio door or something on that backside. I would have no problem if they went through, opened that up, and just took a look out that backside just to see what's going on, Because like Bob said, it's probably a center unit. It's probably going to be difficult to get a 360. If that initial crew just wants to peek just to see, do I have a window that's pouring smoke out? Do I have, is that coming from the roof line? Where is that coming from? Just to kind of get that little extra idea on what's going on. So just something to think about. It's another option that we would have. All right, a little bit on the actual fire behavior itself. So fire, it's really going to be transferring heat, and we know it transfers heat through either like the direct flame, conduction, radiation, and convection. So those are really the main ways that we're going to be transferring that heat. And as we're transferring that heat, the room is absorbing it. So all the contents, the walls, everything is absorbing it. As it's absorbing that heat, it's starting to go through pyrolysis, which leads to a potential flashover. As our building materials retain that heat, they're only allowed to absorb so much heat. At some point, they can't absorb any more heat. And what it does is it just starts to radiate that heat back, kind of what that video was showing earlier. It starts to radiate the heat back. It's just going to continue to heat those superheated gases, heat the rest of the room, and then that just pushes everything towards a flashover condition in that room. And also spreads it, because as it's radiating that heat, it might radiate it down a hallway. It might radiate it into other parts of that building. So also another thing to consider is as those sheetrock and whatever else is absorbing the heat, once it's really met its maximum amount of heat that it can absorb, it really just starts to break down. When you have those super hot conditions, you're just basically breaking down that building material, and you're starting to get it into now the actual structure itself. When you're involving the structure, now you have more potential for fire running through void spaces. You have potential for collapse. You have potential for a lot of other things. So we need to really be mindful on when we're posed with these really hot, high heat levels on what we need to do to actually slow and cool that down. So when we're preheating all those surfaces with that superheated gas, we might see some pressure changes, because as that fire is building, it's creating a higher pressure, which is going to flow to the lower pressures, which creates those flow paths, and it's just waiting for that available oxygen to keep burning. So really what we're seeing on this picture right here, this was from the live burn at the Skyline. On this first one, you can see really good thermal layering. We're looking in on a pretty well-involved fire, and it goes from the slide on the left to the slide on the right pretty quick. And if you were kind of, I don't want to say, suckered into thinking that we can just keep advancing in on this fire, maybe we're in that hallway down the right, we're not even seeing the flames yet. You still have that heavy, thick black smoke above you out in that hallway, and you're going to feel it. You're going to know that that's a pretty hot environment. We got to cool that down, because if you're waiting to see the flames and that flashover, you're going to get taken out of that building, probably on fire yourself. As that thermal layer is above you, that's also radiating heat down onto you. Anybody that's been in a fire and you've really started to really feel that heat, where it feels like, oh man, I'm taking a ton of heat. Your gear has basically absorbed all the heat that it's able to absorb, and now that heat is going into you. If you're not doing anything to cool that environment, make things better for you, or exit, you're going to need to really consider what's going on, because you can't stay in an environment like that. Your gear is already pretty much telling you, I've done my job, I can't do any more, and this fire wants to continue to progress and put more heat onto you. So really wanted to say, just because you have a good thermal layering doesn't mean that you're got a nice safe advancement to the seat of the fire. You should still be checking with a tick at those higher levels. If you're seeing temperatures in the thousands up at the ceiling, you got to cool that down, even if there's not flames there. The nice thing on this type of thermal layering, you got a really good neutral plane here. I can see nice and low. I've got good cool air that's still going into the fire, but I've got incredibly hot air above me. So the neutral plane is good here because I can see nice and low, I can move, but it's not an environment that you want to work in for very long. So again, thermal layering is something that you're going to see in a lot of fires, but just because you see it doesn't mean you're safe. It's something we wanted to hit on a little bit. So this video right here is just going to talk about a little bit about how fires build pressure and just the changes on how that moves and creates flow paths.
When you're operating on the fire ground, it's important to understand that high pressure gases flow to low pressure. This is a basic fire dynamics principle that explains why ventilation works. As a fire develops in a compartment, the heated products of combustion expand, creating an increase in pressure. When you make ventilation changes to the structure by opening a door or taking a window, you're creating a new low pressure and a flow path. A flow path is the areas within a structure where heat, smoke, and air flows from an area of higher pressure to lower pressure. It's composed of at least one intake vent, one exhaust vent, and the connecting volume between the vents. This flow path can be used for your tactical advantage, such as indicating the location of the fire for the advancing hose crew, or to your detriment as hot gases flow from a bedroom fire to a door, passing over your search crew, forcing a retreat. Here's an experiment that's an excellent example of fire flowing from high pressure to low pressure during different stages of the fire. We ignite the fire in the living room on the first floor of this two-story townhouse. As that fire increases in size, the temperature increases, which increases the pressure, which has the products of combustion flow out of that second floor window that's halfway open. You'll see light smoke start to come out of that second floor window as that first floor pressure increases. That window acts as the low pressure and will continue to do so until the fire on the first floor runs out of oxygen. Once the fire on the first floor runs out of oxygen, it's going to change the pressure. It's going to be looking for oxygen, so it's going to try and pull oxygen from around the front door. You'll see the smoke puffing at the front door. When it can't get any oxygen through that front door, the temperatures are going to decrease. As the temperatures on the first floor decrease, the pressure decreases. As that pressure decreases, it's actually going to go into a negative pressure. As you see, no more smoke is coming out of that second floor window until the first floor door gets opened. Once that door gets opened, creates a new flow path. Air goes in the lower half of the door, hot gases come out the top half of the door, and as that fire begins to increase in size, you also get those gases flowing up that second floor to the low pressure out of that bedroom window, leading this fire to transition to flashover.
So that was one of those examples that I wanted to hit on if you saw that type of condition, you know, the smoke coming out of that upper level window, most of us would say, okay, that's where the smoke is, that's where the fire is, right? Well, you might not realize that the fire is actually on the first floor. One thing that I noted on this, and you kind of see it through some of these other videos as well, there was a lot of smoke staining on that front door. So you can kind of start to tell when a fire's gone into that decay phase or might be in a different location. Just before I vent or force that door open, if I just look at it a little bit and you see all that staining around that front door, that's kind of telling me, hey, wait a minute, something was going on here before I even got here. That fire might be in a different location and it might have already burned up all of its usable oxygen. It's just waiting for me to open this door. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be an immediate backdraft, but it might rapidly advance. And if you vent that door before you have a hose line in place, you're potentially going to allow that fire to get into a very well advanced state before we can start cooling it off. So before you take that door, make sure you got that hose line ready to go and that you're actually ready to make entry, because again, it is a vent that you're creating. So you can see the photo it's not the greatest quality on this one, but the fire is creating pressure, and that's a pretty well involved fire, but it has so much pressure that it's actually pushing out of, you know, eaves and whatever else, and that smoke is not turbulent, right, on different locations that it's being pushed out of. There's just so much pressure that it is pushing through different locations because it can't vent fast enough. So that's just telling me how much fuel and oxygen that this fire has. It wants to burn, it just doesn't vent it enough. It's pushing smoke and products of combustion throughout this entire house. So it's probably smoke-filled rooms throughout. They might not all be hot, but they're all going to be very full of smoke. So just kind of keeping some of those clues as to what you're going to be getting into, because if, you know, maybe you see this on one unit and maybe you just have pushing smoke coming from another unit, and we're going to go search that the second unit, well, that could still be a dangerous unit to go into. It could still be smoke filled with products of combustion and just waiting for a failure of a door or whatever else to really get that next room going. So just keeping in mind, you're going to be able to tell how advanced a fire is if you can see some of those signs of just volume and pushed smoke into other areas of the building. So really, when we get on scene, we're checking, is there already a flow path established? Are we going to be establishing any? And sometimes they can be on purpose, and sometimes it's just going to be the nature of, well, that I need to go in this door, and that's going to create a new flow path. The idea of also, I can see that there's smoke coming out of this window. Maybe I want to completely open that window before I make entry for whatever attack purpose you're going to go in with. Maybe we want to establish that really good flow path to allow for more of a inlet at the front door. Maybe that's the route you want to go, but we just need to be mindful of whatever I do and the flow paths I establish, they're really going to tell you where the fire is going to start going towards. And the other thought to that is, can we reverse any of those or stop those flow paths? Some of the conversations we had during that smoke reading was, shutting that front door. If I'm going to take that front door, I'd better also be ready to shut that front door. If I take a window, I can't untake a window. Once that window's open, it's open, especially if you're breaking it. So really just knowing, is this a flow path that I can say, oh, no, never mind, that didn't work? Or is this a flow path that I'm pretty much all in on? Also, some things to think about is the weather. Again, what way is the wind blowing from? The things to look at for the flow path. Do I have a separate inlet and a separate exhaust? So like it was maybe one window just pushing all of my exhaust out, and maybe just the front door is just only sucking air in. If that's the case, I've got a pretty easy shot to get to that fire, which is really going to be helpful for you. If you have that bilateral or bidirectional flow, where maybe that front door has the product of combustion coming out high and nice cool air coming in low, I can operate down low, but knowing that fire is still going to want to come out over my head. So again, just understanding how that flow path looks and the directions that it's going is going to also tell me what position I'm putting myself in. Application of water streams can also change your flow paths. We'll hit on some videos earlier or later on this, just on how that can change my flow path. Forcing entry is changing the flow path. Again, anytime that we open those doors, and anytime that we do ventilation, if it's vertical, if it's horizontal, if it's opening windows, whatever that is, that's creating new flow paths, and they need to be thought out. If somebody's just doing it because, oh, there's too much smoke in there, we saw some videos earlier on, you're basically, if you haven't cooled that environment down, you're just basically introducing oxygen and just going to allow it to roll over and flash over. So really being mindful of what these flow paths are and what you're doing on this fire is going to be very important.
Chief?
Yeah.
In that same area though, everything we're talking about right now is pretty much talking about convective airflow, the airflow that's being generated by the movement of heat, and some of the natural elements of wind conditions. But did you want to touch base at all on positive pressure and how that can significantly change those flow paths?
Yeah, we got a video a little bit later on that it's not necessarily positive pressure, but it's elements of positive pressure. But we usually reserve positive pressure for once the fire's been knocked down. Generally what we see on our fire scenes is we start ventilating when the fire's knocked down, we start to introduce that airflow through the front door, and that really is gonna push all the products of combustion out of a designated exhaust. Some fire attacks, they'll start positive pressure at the front door, vent a window, and what they're doing is they're just forcing a flow path. They're creating it with a fan and saying that this is the way that we're going to have it go. Not something that we've done a lot of, but it is something that some departments have used and have gone with. But it can be used for a ventilation attack, basically a positive pressure attack. But a little bit later on, we're going to kind of show how that would work if you could actually do it with a hose stream. So we will get into that a little bit.
A good incident action plan involves an understanding of where the fire is located and where it is spreading. Fire gases and heat will move from an area of higher pressure, typically where the fire is, to an area of lower pressure. This path of smoke and heat spread is known as the exhaust portion of the flow path. In a structure fire, a flow path exists between the fire and an area of high pressure and any adjacent room, hall, stairway, open door, or window that connects to an area of lower pressure. During fire suppression, firefighters have the opportunity to take advantage of how water streams can alter this flow of smoke and heat. In some instances, it is advantageous to alter the flow. For example, during an interior attack when there is a vent opposite the advancing hose crew. Entraining as much air as possible with the hose stream creates pressure that can push the products of combustion ahead of the advancing crew. In other instances, for example, during an exterior water application, it can be more effective to cool and knock back the fire using streams and nozzle handling techniques that limit air entrainment and pressure buildup. This limits the impact on the flow path and allows the exterior vent to continue to function as an exhaust vent. Flow path and fire suppression must be thought of together. Knowing how and when to alter the flow path makes for a more effective and safer fire attack.
So I think that talked a little bit about what you were just saying, Jonathan, about actually doing a positive pressure attack. You know, as we go down that hallway, if you do a wide fog and the fire's already been vented out of a window, you're just going to keep pushing all those products of combustion that way. So that is one way that we can kind of show how that would work if you did a positive pressure attack on a fire. Being mindful, if you don't have that vent though, if that vent has not been established, you're really just going to be creating a lot of steam and pressure and really disrupting that thermal layering. So you really need to make sure that there has to be that vent opposite of that attack. If it's not there, then you're really going to kind of not be gaining any benefits to what you're trying to do. Same can be said if other flow paths start to overwhelm what you're trying to establish as well. If other windows fail as you're doing that, you could also potentially have some other changes on that fire ground as well. Quick hits, that's something that we've kind of used quite a bit. It's really, when done properly, it really allows for us to make a good attack. It allows for us to get in quickly. It really allows less of a chance for that fire to flash or roll over on us. Really what we're trying to do is buy us some time. We're trying to slow that fire down. We're trying to take a lot of the momentum out of that fire so we can get ourselves into that residence or that structure, complete searches, advance to the fire, and get in there quickly is really what it is. It's, if we do it right, we're really not going to disrupt that thermal layering too much. So hopefully we still have a good view down low that we're able to complete searches. We're really able to spend more time in there. We're able to operate more efficiently because it's not as hot, which is an important part as well. Really, they talk about it a little bit here. There's no magic number, but 10 to 15 seconds seems to be a pretty good gauge. If you're not making an effect on that fire with 10 to 15 seconds of water flow, you're really not having a good effect. So you need to either reposition, try a different angle, whatever that might be, and give it another 10, 15 seconds. If you're just continually flowing on this and the fire's not retreating back into the room, you're no longer doing a quick hit. It's just going to be an exterior flat fire, because if we're not able to cool it down and slow it down with water flow from the exterior, you're really not going to have much more of an effect from the interior. Now you're just putting yourselves in a position that now you have to absorb all that heat as well. So just be mindful. If you're not having an effect, that doesn't mean, screw it, we're just going to go in. Try to adjust, try to get another line, try to do another tactic on it. Best done with a solid stream, steep angle in the room, and bouncing it off of that ceiling. And we'll show some videos on how that works here.
When there's fire venting from the A side, near the entry door, with no other openings on the structure, it's easy to determine the location of the fire. In this scenario, a transitional attack may be the most effective way to knock back, confine, and suppress the fire. In this scenario, the fire is venting from the side A window near the door. No other vents are open, and the neutral plane is above the sill of the window. The lack of additional vents and neutral plane position indicate the seat of the fire is located in that compartment. When a transitional attack is chosen, the most effective method of initial water application to coat the most surfaces, thus providing the most cooling, is as steep of an angle as possible off the ceiling. Keep the nozzle as steady as possible. The nozzle firefighter should be constantly evaluating the effectiveness of water application, looking for indications that it's having an effect. The flames in the gas layer should begin to extinguish within seconds. If no effect is noted, the nozzle should be directed in a different location, or possibly off the top of the window to coat surfaces. Once the gases have been cooled enough to no longer have fire venting out the window, the nozzle can be shut down to evaluate those conditions. There is no specific time limit or suggested flow time, as the time required for cooling should be based on conditions. If the water application is no longer showing signs of effective cooling, the application angle should be adjusted. Once the gases have been cooled and the nozzle shut down, the nozzle firefighter should apply water to any visible flame in the compartment. If visibility is limited, a half bale or narrow fog should be applied through the window in a wide O pattern to coat the most surfaces. Care should be taken to limit air entrainment by ensuring the nozzle is placed inside the window. If the suppression crew cannot apply water directly due to an obstruction near the opening or the elevation of the window, such as a second floor fire, or if the tactic is ineffective, they should rapidly transition to the interior once the gases are cooled. While relocating the line to the front door, the crew should pay attention to the conditions at the front door, evaluating for the conditions which indicate transitional attack was not effective. Consideration should be given to the line used for final interior suppression. The crew should utilize the most rapid method of transitioning. In some instances, this will be by relocating the initial attack line to the interior, and in others, it may be deploying an additional line for interior suppression. If more than one crew is available, consideration should be given to conducting simultaneous exterior application and interior advancement.
That's a pretty good video showing how a quick hit should look. I think it was pretty impressive to see without even moving that hand line at all. They just put a nice steep angle, bounced that water off the ceiling. They knocked down all of that fire. They did quite a bit. And a little bit later on here, we're going to get into what some of that air entrainment might do as we're covering some of these exhaust vents and how that would be possibly pretty bad for us to see that happen. So it's pretty important that we keep that nice and still. We do a nice, solid, smooth attack at the ceiling and not really entrain a lot of air or cover that vent. When we have vents established, we want them to stay vents. It's the same as if we went and cut a hole on the roof. You wouldn't want to then just put a fog nozzle over the top of that and then push everything back down, because now you're trying to say, hey, we're going to make this a vent, but I'm also going to use it as an inlet. And it doesn't really work, because all that does is just push all the products of combustion and everything in a direction that we didn't want it to go. So allowing vents to stay vents are going to allow that product of combustion out of that room, and doing a proper quick hit is going to cool it down and take the heat out of it and really allow us to do our job and make entry then. So this is a little bit about pushing that fire. We talked a little bit about this before, but if we do it incorrectly, you can absolutely push fire. I know it's kind of an old school thought that, you know, don't do quick hits. We don't want to do them because, you know, you're going to push fire, you're going to put it in the wrong locations. And that's pretty much been debunked. It's not going to happen unless you do a quick hit incorrectly. If we cover that exhaust with a wide fog, yeah, you're going to push fire. You're going to put it in locations that you don't want it to go. And there's a video on here that's going to kind of show how that looks and works. But we can also use that to our benefit. We can push fire. Again, kind of like John was talking about earlier with the positive pressure fire attack. You can do the same thing with a fog nozzle as you're going down a hallway. We can push all those products of combustion out of already established exhaust vents as we're making our way in. That, again, only works if there's already an established exhaust vent, though.
Many firefighters have been taught that all hose streams can push fire. Therefore, you must always fight fire from the unburned side. Some firefighters have even experienced fire being pushed on them. But what does pushing fire mean? Pushing fire. When fuel gases, hot enough to burn, are displaced or pushed by pressure from an oxygen-limited fire compartment to a space with oxygen that mixes with the hot fuel gases and results in combustion. What conditions do you need to push fire? Well, typically, you need a ventilation-controlled fire in a flow path that has intake and exhaust vents. Then you need a pressure source to create the push. In addition, you need an area on the low pressure side that has oxygen available for combustion. If you do not have these conditions, you cannot push fire. The pressure source could be from the wind, a fan, a fog stream, or a solid stream on a hand line that's being whipped around. If you review our research studies, we've conducted studies with each of these sources of pressure, and you'll see that even a small increase in pressure can drive hot fire gases through a space at speeds ranging from 6 miles an hour to greater than 20 miles per hour. There are situations where firefighters may want to use this push to their advantage when fighting a fire. Working with ISFSI and the Spartanburg Fire Department, we set up some tests to demonstrate pushing fire and also to show how it is important to choose your hose stream wisely and use it effectively for times when you want to avoid the push, the buildup of pressure. This video shows a post-flashover room fire in the rear of the structure. The rear room window is serving as both an intake and an exhaust vent for the fire room. The middle room is connected to the fire room by an open doorway. The middle room is also serving as an exhaust-only vent because the windowsill height is above the neutral plane. Note that the exhaust gases have enough heat and fuel to burn, but they don't mix with enough oxygen to burn until they are above the eave line. The fog stream is going to minimize the water entering the fire room, maximize the air entering the fire room, and provide the air pressure needed to push. Let's look at another experiment. Here we have two rooms on the second floor of a house. Both rooms are similar in size and had similar fuel loads, consisting of a wood bed frame, mattress, box spring, wood dresser, and pallets. The interior finish of the rooms in the connecting hallway at the top of the stairs consisted of wood paneling and oriented strand board on the walls, gypsum board and OSB on the ceiling, and wood flooring. The open doorways from each bedroom are opposite each other at the top of the stair. The doorway to the exterior at the bottom of the stairway is open. The cameras are located in this doorway looking up the stair. This door will serve as an air intake for the fire upstairs. The upstairs windows are the only point of exhaust initially in the fire, as the smoke building in the hallway does not have enough pressure to push all the way down the stairs against the intake flow of the air. The beds in both rooms were ignited at the same time and the fires began to develop. When both rooms had reached the fully developed fire stage, based on the available ventilation, gas temperatures near the ceiling were in excess of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and the command to initiate water flow was issued. On the right-hand window, 150 gallon per minute straight stream was flowed. The straight stream was deflected off the ceiling to cool the gases in the room. The straight stream was then applied with minimal movement. This stream choice and nozzle handling technique maximized the amount of water entering the fire compartment, minimized the entrainment of air due to the hose stream, and kept the vent area of the window as open as possible to maintain the window as a low pressure exhaust vent. This allows combustion products and steam out of the window even though the line is flowing. The result? Little to no impact on the fire in the hallway at the top of the stairs, and a temperature decrease from the peak temperature at the ceiling in the right room from approximately 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit down to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, a 150 gallon per minute fog stream, wide enough to cover the window, was flowed over the left-hand window on the second floor. The idea was to cover the vent, which minimized the amount of water that entered the fire compartment and increased the amount of air that was entrained into the fire compartment, and increase the pressure at the window vent, thereby blocking the vent. Initially, this caused a surge of heated gases and smoke to be pushed down the stairs, as well as an increase in temperature in the fire compartment. As the fog nozzle was moved forward, more water began to enter the compartment and the temperature began to decrease. The fog stream created a higher pressure area at the window, effectively turning the exhaust vent into an intake. This added extra air for combustion, and it was an ineffective amount of water. In other words, not enough to cool the fire compartment, and therefore it converted to steam. This combination increased the pressure in the fire room and caused a quick burst of heat and flame to push down the stairs. When the fog stream was narrowed and moved forward, more water entered the fire compartment. The pressure at the window reduced. Cooling the fire reduced the pressure created by the fire itself and caused some of the fire gases to contract. As a result, the high pressure push stopped. So we've shown that you can push fire with a hose stream if the air from the stream creates a higher pressure area and the lower pressure area has oxygen available for combustion. However, we can also see that this can be prevented by the use of a solid or straight stream with limited movement if you're attacking from the exhaust side. If you're working in the interior and attacking toward the exhaust, you may want to use air pressure to your advantage to force heat away from your position and out another exhaust vent. Basically, it's all a battle of the pressures, pushing fire. When fuel gases hot enough to burn are displaced from an oxygen-limited compartment to a space with oxygen that mixes with the hot fuel gases and results in combustion. Please see our studies on ventilation, positive pressure ventilation, and fire attack so you can get a better understanding of the pressures created by a fire inside a structure, the impact of wind, the impact of fans, and the impact of hose streams so you can make good choices on the fire ground.
I thought that was a pretty good video. I don't think you see a lot of studies done on how fire can be pushed and how that can affect some of these other rooms and areas. So I thought it was really neat that they had that and they had some information there that you can kind of take away from and see the effects that it has inside of a fire. So it really does show doing it a proper quick hit has much more effect than doing a improper one. So we might, by doing the right call, maybe somebody called for a quick hit, but if it's done improperly, might have detrimental effects to the whole operation on scene. Same thing as we're advancing towards the seat of the fire. Want to make sure that if we're working in that neutral plane, as we're getting closer to the fire, it might be dropping on us a little bit. We might be getting closer and closer to the heat source, so we're getting more and more heat on top of us. It might require us to cool that environment as we're moving forward, and that might be happening even if there's no flames present. And again, that is just really there to make sure that we're not going to get stuck in a flashover or a rollover type of an environment. One of the things that they talk about is hearing return of water. So as we're spraying water, as we're advancing down or penciling the ceiling, if you're not hearing water come back down or fall, that means all of it has been absorbed into steam and it's a very hot environment up above you. Once you're starting to hear water fall back down, we've cooled that environment above us enough that water isn't converting to steam and it's able to drop back down. So it's a little bit safer of an environment. This can also be tested with a tick. If your officer has a tick, they can be checking that area above them as they're advancing. How hot is it? I don't always trust the heat temperature gauge on our ticks, but you can generally tell if the colors are lighting up on you pretty good, that it might be a pretty hot environment above you, and that you're going to want to see how that hose line interacts with it. Is the hose line able to cool it down before you advance any further? Again, straight stream, short bursts at the ceiling. Another thing that we talked about last night is you can do the upside down U. As you're advancing down a hallway, you're just kind of making that upside down U, which is basically spraying one side of the hallway up to the ceiling and then coming back down on the other side. Going back to what we talked about earlier, as that superheated gases move through that hallway, it's preheating the surfaces everywhere. If we're able to kind of coat all those surfaces with some nice cool water, we're going to take some of the punch out of that, the fire and the spread and the pyrolysis that's taking place in that room as well. So being mindful of the hose stream that you're using is really going to be able to start to help you advance towards the seat of the fire. Again, don't let the lack of flames convince you that you're in a safe location. If you're in heavy smoke with high heat, you're very close to flashover point. When you're feeling that temperature on your shoulders, you're feeling that temperature on your arms, your back, whatever else, that's traveling through a lot of gear that's meant to protect you. When that gear is no longer protecting you, you're at your end of your abilities inside of that structure. You need to start cooling it, or you need to get yourself out of there. I'll show a quick video here. Not all of these things are things that we would typically do. And I'm not saying just because you're the officer, you need to fall in lines with this, but I thought it was a pretty good video on advancing towards a fire and just how to deploy.
You can't always plan when you'll need a gun. Rational gun owners carry not because it's a weapon, but because it's a shield.
During the past several years, the Fire Service has benefited from NIST and UL's research on how fires develop in enclosed structures. They have taught us about how fast fires progress and how much energy is released when modern materials burn. We have learned the importance of controlling the fire by limiting the available oxygen. This research has resulted in significant changes to how we fight fires. Like many fire departments around the country, including FDNY, Los Angeles County Fire Department is changing how we approach enclosed structure fires to be consistent with this new research. All of these changes are to prevent flashover conditions from developing. We're changing a very old tradition of fire attack, where we don't flow water until at the seat of the fire. Now we are saying that it's okay to flow water above you into the smoke, which we know is fuel. This will cool the space around you. Also, by controlling the entry door, we limit the amount of fresh air that enters the building, thereby limiting the fire's growth. UL studies have shown this to be very effective in reducing temperatures and decreasing the potential of flashover. The first arriving engine to a structure fire has a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, especially if you're at scene with a 3-person crew. If you are arriving with a 4-person crew, one firefighter will be assigned door control, while the other firefighter and captain advance the line. As the door control firefighter, your job is to control the flow path of fresh air to the fire. You are trying to keep the fire ventilation limited or oxygen deprived. When the door control firefighter arrives at the entry point, the firefighter will assess the door. If the door is open, close it until the line is ready to be advanced. If the door is locked, force entry and control the access point. The firefighter assigned to door control establishes an equipment pool. This consists of a flashlight and irons, forcible entry tools. These tools are used to keep the fire attack team aware of their point of entry in the event of a rapid egress. You do this by placing the flashlight inside the door and using a tool to sound. After the fire attack team has entered the structure, the door control firefighter places the flashlight inside the door and then closes the entry door 2/3 of the way to control the flow path. If you are the door control firefighter, you need to assist the fire attack crew by feeding the line past the door. Your hand needs to be on the attack line to assist with hose advancement or withdrawal, and so you know when the attack crew is flowing water. Having your hand on the line is critical. This informs you when water is flowing so you can coordinate ventilation at the door. The door control firefighter will advise the fire attack crew of changing conditions. When the water is applied to the fire and steam is produced, the door control firefighter should open the door and allow the steam to escape. If the fire attack crew has to travel a distance away from the door, As the door control firefighter, you can enter the structure in order to better communicate the point of entry to your attack team. The fire attack firefighter pulls the attack line to the front door and prepares the line for entry by rick-racking the hose at the entrance. Once at the door, you call for water and don your SCBA and gloves. When the hose is charged, you bleed the line and check the nozzle pattern prior to entering the building. The nozzle pattern should be a straight stream. Before entry, check for heat by applying a short burst of water onto the upper third of the door. If steam is produced, you know you have heat. The next several tasks of the team is critical to limiting the fire's growth and effectively getting inside to control the fire. As the nozzle firefighter and the captain are ready to advance inside the door control firefighter opens the door cautiously. Once the door is cracked open, the firefighter at the nozzle flows a straight stream at the ceiling to check the temperature. If the water is converted to steam and doesn't return in the form of water droplets, this indicates high heat at the ceiling. This is a watch out in structure firefighting. High heat at the ceiling can mean the fire is rapidly moving toward flashover. Slowing the fire's progression at this point is achieved by taking a leg out of the fire triangle. When the temperature is reduced enough to allow water droplets to return from the ceiling, the fire attack crew advances the line further into the structure. Bouncing short bursts of water off the ceiling into the smoke layer should occur while the line is advanced into the building. Be careful not to flow too much water. Maintain your thermal balance by flowing enough water so the heated gases contract when cooled. Too much water can create steam that expands and collapses the neutral plane. If you note a change in conditions, flow some water to check the heat. It's about building your situational awareness inside the structure. The water in your hose line is your lifeline. It is your tool to put the fire out and to keep you safe. Use it. A little water on the furnishings around you won't destroy them. However, not flowing water and crawling into a flashover will destroy you and those you are attempting to save. Numerous NIOSH firefighter fatality reports and recent incidents around the country are evidence of this statement being true. If a thermal imaging camera is available, the captain or any other member who has the tick should monitor the temperature from floor to ceiling. If you're arriving with a 3-person engine, the captain will initiate door control. The captain will bring the irons and a flashlight to the entry. As a captain, you will also bring the thermal imaging camera if it's available. As the crew approaches the door, you must keep your eyes on the smoke. Smoke conditions can indicate where the fire is located and what is burning, and even the stage that it's in. This is critical information for the entry team. If the door is open and conditions indicate the fire is ventilation limited and wanting air to grow, limit the fire's growth by shutting the door. This is the captain's responsibility when the 3-person engine company arrives. If the door is locked, force entry and control the access. After the attack line is charged, the firefighter specialist will assume the door control position until relieved by the next arriving unit. We understand that this is something new. Well, convince yourself of the value of this information by reviewing the research. And refer to the hands-on drill plan posted in Blackboard. And lastly, make sure you get out there and practice. Review each position. Get several repetitions in door control and advancing that line into an enclosed structure fire. And finally, if you have any questions, give us a call in training.
I think they covered some good points as far as how we advance towards some things to look for. I liked some of the comments on having the tick with us. Sometimes we kind of just use the tick as a tool to find our way, but it should really be a tool that's used to evaluate the environment that we're in. We should really be using it to check conditions. We should be using it to check on crew locations. We should be using it as a sweep tool for checking a broad sweep of the room that we're in. To see if we can't locate any patients, windows, doors, areas of significance that we'd like to see. So I do like that talked about as well. Really, the big thing on this is just being mindful. When we open that door, are we giving enough time for that newly established flow path to show us what it wants to do? If it's floor to ceiling smoke pouring out of there, that's an exhaust. And if we just rush right through there, we've pushed ourselves in exhaust flow, and that's really going to be potentially bad for us. So really just making sure that we're taking the time to allow the building to react to what we've done to it and really read what's happening, flowing that water up high, seeing if that steam is converting or not, and returning back, and then really knowing if we're able to advance in. So I think that was some good stuff there. Oop, wrong way. All right, this is my last slide for fire behavior type stuff, and then I just have one slide on building behavior. So before I get too far, does anybody have any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments on what we've talked about so far that's worth discussing while we're still kind of on the fire behavior topic? Awesome, I'll take that as a success. So most of the fires that we're going to come across, Jonathan, you got your iPad open, you got something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I like the videos that you showed, the one prior to that regarding the UL study. They talked about push and fire.
Yeah.
I showed that video in the Central Lakes College webinar too.
Okay.
And the one comment that was made that the guy standing back to the straight stream, he's really far back from the actual house.
Yes.
We're trying to hold it still. In all the videos that you've been taught before, they showed the guy getting pretty close and using that steep angle, and that was not a steep angle.
No, it wasn't.
That's like the one downfall of that video.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I'm like, I know it's a second floor, so it's a little bit more difficult to get, but you could definitely get a lot more of a steep angle on that.
Agreed.
Get some good water flow in there. So I think that's a good point to bring up on that. All right, so on these ventilation limited fires, I would say pretty much every fire that we see is ventilation limited. And really I say that because most buildings that we go into have more than enough fuel to burn in them. They're just not able to vent enough or get enough oxygen to burn it all. So we're really seeing a lot of ventilation limited fires, which really means that we need to be cautious on how we approach. We need to really see which way that exhaust is going to be flowing, which way the inlet air is going to be flowing, and understanding how we're positioning ourselves and how that fire is going to want to progress. Because as soon as we establish that new oxygen flow, as soon as we allow for more exhaust to flow out, you're going to see an increase in temperatures, you're going to see an increase in fire volume. So if we're not ready to spray it, or if we're not currently cooling down that environment, you're just going to be growing the fire if you're just taking one approach as far as ventilation would be assumed. So I got a couple videos on that, and then we'll go ahead and talk about some building construction and types, and then we'll be done for the day.
Firefighters know that a fire needs fuel, heat, and oxygen to sustain. When you were introduced to the fire triangle, you were probably introduced to the stages of fire development: ignition, growth, fully developed, and decay. This rings true when you make a campfire or when you have a piece of furniture on fire in a parking lot, because the fire will have access to a supply of oxygen all around it. There's a big difference between fighting fires in parking lots and fighting fires in enclosed structures. Because modern home furnishings burn faster, consuming oxygen faster, and release energy faster than in the past, today's fires grow until they become ventilation limited. Fire development changes when a fire becomes ventilation limited. At this point, when the fire department arrives, there may be nothing showing, but if there's still heat and fuel, once oxygen is reintroduced, the fire will grow rapidly to a ventilation-induced flashover. If the fire department arrives and there's fire burning outside of the structure through windows or doors, the fire is still ventilation limited. In other words, if additional vents are made, the fire will continue to increase in size. It's very unlikely that you can ventilate your way out of a ventilation-limited fire, because adding more air usually just allows more fuel to burn, releasing more heat. Fuel and heat definitely contribute to fire growth, but it's the amount of oxygen that makes the difference in how fast fire is allowed to release heat. Control the oxygen, and you have control of the fire. In this video, we measured the heat release rate of 2 rooms. One furnished like a typical living room, and one filled with chairs and sofas. Both rooms go to flashover, and even though one has significantly more furnishings, they both have the same heat release rate, around 7 megawatts, because the size of the fire is limited by the amount of ventilation or the size of the opening on the front of the room. The room with more furnishings will burn longer, but it won't release more energy unless more air can enter the room by creating another opening. This occurs later in the comparison as the ceiling begins to fail in the over-furnished room, allowing more air in. More products of combustion out, and the heat release rate goes up. This is the same as if you arrive on the scene with fire out of one window. Venting a second window lets more air in to increase the size of the fire, so coordinate water on the fire to stop that fire growth.
At this point, we've all heard how synthetic furnishings and the evolving methods and materials used in building construction are continuing to change the fire environment, leading to new challenges for the fire service. Fires today grow and spread faster than ever before. Where previously fires may have grown steadily from ignition to flashover and a fully developed state, today's fires are controlled by the amount of ventilation and oxygen available. As the fire grows rapidly, the available oxygen within the space is consumed, and the fire transitions to an underventilated state, where the temperatures and pressures within the home begin to decline. This often occurs before the fire has ever even reached flashover. The available oxygen within homes today is often limited due to the construction practices which focus on energy efficiency, leading to tighter buildings and minimal leakage. Because of the lack of oxygen within the home, the fire is now starved for air, and any change in ventilation provides a new supply of oxygen, which can lead to rapid fire growth and minimal reaction time for firefighters. One of the consistent themes seen throughout the research to date is the concept that ventilation must be coordinated with suppression. Coordination on the fire ground begins with the very first fire service intervention, which is typically when the arriving crews force the front door for entry. Knowing that the fire is most likely in a ventilation-controlled state, firefighters must be aware that opening the front door for entry is providing the fire with a new source of oxygen. Conditions may begin to deteriorate as the fire begins to regrow and move towards the front door. The speed of regrowth and the reaction time for firefighters occupying the space is all dependent on the proximity of the fire to the now open vent. The opening of the front door should be coordinated with a charged hose line and firefighters dressed and ready for entry. Depending on the extent of fire development prior to going vent limited, the fire may regrow quick enough to prevent firefighters from entering the building. However, many times firefighters are able to enter the structure to begin search and rescue before the fire makes it to the front door. This can place firefighters in a dangerous spot as they advance down the flow path to the seat of the fire. Firefighters should always be aware that once the front door has been opened, a new flow path has now been created, and the fire will continue to grow and move towards this open, low-pressure vent until it's controlled via suppression. Forcing the front door needs to be considered in the same way as any other form of horizontal ventilation. In many cases, the front door can allow for quicker regrowth because the open doorway goes to the floor, which allows the denser, cooler air to work its way in low along the floor when compared to a window which is higher in the space and less efficient at entraining air. Prior to opening the door for entry, crews must ensure that face pieces are on, firefighters are breathing air, and lines are charged so that the transition to the interior can occur quickly. Don't forget to make a quick observation of conditions at the front door when you open it. Where is the neutral plane? Do you notice any fresh air being drawn in or any gravity current to point you in the direction of the fire? What is the smoke doing? How about the color, density, and velocity? As you enter the building, you must be aware that you are now entering into a new flow path, which means that the fire is going to be growing and coming towards you, seeking the path of least resistance until water's flowing and you've gained control of the situation. If the front door is open for firefighter entry, it's also open for air. Tactical discipline with forcible entry and coordination with suppression are key.
So my big takeaway on that is they talk a little bit about these ventilation limited fires and how a fire can already be ventilation limited and already been in a decay phase, just waiting for more of that oxygen. Once we get on scene, we open that door, and then you get that rapid growth of fire again. One of the big clues that I've seen on pretty much every one of these videos that they do that, there's smoke staining on that front door. So anytime that you're going to go force entry on a door, just because you've been given the order, go break that door, we all get pretty excited and we just want to go break that door down. We got to take a second and really size it up. Not just how am I going to attack this door, but how does the conditions look on this door before I even open it? Is there currently smoke pushing out of the open cracks? Is there staining around the door, which is going to really indicate that there is potentially going to be a rapid regrowth of a fire once this door is open? You also have to look, is my crew ready to go? Am I ready to go? Do I have my face piece on? Do I have my air turned on? Is there a charged hose line? All those components are going to be huge anytime that we're dealing with these vent limited fires, because we don't want them to rapidly grow on us and get ahead of us. So just some things to think about there with these vent limited fires. That's really the last I have on fire behavior stuff. I'm going to go ahead and jump into building materials, or I'm sorry, building type, which I'm sure this group is going to be pretty well versed on. So now I think the only people I haven't called on yet would be Todd and Matt. I also see somebody on here listed for City of Blaine. Is there someone that I'm missing?
The City of Blaine is 3 of us watching it on the big screen.
Oh, perfect. No, that works perfect. Just a reminder on that, if you guys aren't listed on here, just shoot me an email or something and let me know that you were watching this, just so I make sure I can get you some drill credit for today. So, don't worry, I'm just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing someone. So, hey Matt, if I can have you go ahead and start telling me the building types of these buildings on the top, just the top 3. I'll have you just go explain what type of building it is, and then some of the hazards that you might consider with that building.
The top left, that would be a type 5 single family. I guess hazards is lightweight construction. It's going to burn faster.
Absolutely.
I don't know. We're all pretty familiar with that now.
Yeah. Yep.
The middle one, I don't know, the type 3.
Yeah, I mean, just taking a guess from the outside, I would say that's probably a type 3 style of construction. Yep.
So it's a commercial building. You're going to have, depending on what they do in there, your equipment in there. Could have hazardous something that can burn in there. There's no telling what kind of you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you don't know what's going to be stored in there. You don't know the layout. There could potentially be a shop in the back with some probably offices up front in a lot of these types of buildings that we have. I think type 3 kind of present more of those void space and chases that need to really make sure that we're checking and getting into. So yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we don't know if that's sprinkled or not.
Absolutely. That's another unknown, especially with the age of it. You don't know if it is. Bob, I see you just clicked in. You got something to add on that?
Yeah. If it's a type 3 building, what is the roof deck probably made out of? Looks like the exterior is all made out of probably non-combustible concrete block.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
what would you think it is?
Yep.
Because it could potentially be a wood frame, correct, Bob?
Right.
Yeah.
So difference between a type 3 and a type 2. A type 3 is going to have potentially, it will have some wood framing members, structural members in there. So the walls are typically block or concrete, something non-combustible, and then the floors and the roof, if it was like a multi-story, would be of wood construction. So the building itself has something to add to the fire load. Easy way to remember it is think about, I always think about Main Street, downtown Main Streets of old towns where you got the block walls between each building, and then all the floors and everything are made out of wood. So just know that's the difference between a type 2 and a type 3 building. This one might actually have wood in it as part of the structure.
Absolutely, and that's going to give you some of those void and chase spaces that are potentially going to be burning that you need to be checking. So that's a great point on these buildings. All right, Matt, you're on your last one.
Last one is what, Medtronic type 1, fully sprinkled, and a high rise. What is it, 6 something stories?
I think so, yeah, 6 stories.
So your challenges are gonna be if anything over, 3-4 stories. But then again, it's fully sprinkled, so it should not ever get out of control.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the benefits to these type 1 buildings is that you're gonna have fully sprinkled, and all of these structural components should be fire resistant and protected, right? So we do have some things afforded to us on this. The potentials that you're gonna have is, like you said, it's a big building, it's tall. Potentials for more cold smoke and conditions that we're going to have to try to fight our way through. We're going to have a tougher time venting this. You might have to use the ventilation systems that are already in place with the building, or elevator shafts, or whatever you're going to have to use for venting, because there's really not many openings for windows and things like that. So new, different challenges that you might come across with it, but it does afford you some comfort knowing that it probably shouldn't fail as long as things are working as designed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, with that first one, that's a type 5, it's a lightweight building. So, I mean, we're pretty well versed. A lot of the fires that we go into are a type 5 type of a building. It's wood construction. But type 5 with lightweight is a big difference than a type 5 of a different construction method. So anytime that you have those lightweights and we're starting to think that it's actually involving the structure itself, we're really going to have some of those concerns for some of those collapse and rapid fire advancements on those types of buildings, correct?
Amen.
All right, good job. Todd, we'll go ahead and have you finish up with the bottom 3.
The bottom 3, the first one is a type 5 residential wood frame, typical problems that we'd all face. I'm thinking that looks like a Kohl's, so I'm guessing type 1, possibly, depending on what roofs. I'm assuming that they have steel trusses.
Mm-hmm.
The third one, apartment building, which I would say I think is a type 5 there. I'm guessing that's made with wood interior because of the age of the building.
Yep, and it's almost kind of put on there almost as a little bit of a trick, because again, there we see brick, right? So you almost start to think, well, is that a masonry exterior wall with wood interior? But it's not. That's just a brick veneer. So again, we need to understand that's wood frame for exterior walls. So like you said, it's a type 5 just with the construction and the age of it. And it's gonna burn the same as any of the other type 5s. It's different because it's an apartment building now, correct?
Correct.
Yep. So the apartment buildings do afford us a little bit in that things are more compartmentalized. There's some more protections put in between each rooms, things like that. But there's a lot more patience. There's a lot more hallways. There's a lot more lays of line. It's a much bigger building. There's a lot more to burn. So different in that aspect for that type 5. And like you said in the first one, pretty generic, right? That's a Rambler. We see those all over Southern and Western Blaine and our district in general. That one's a little bit more of the old style of construction, though. You might see some bigger, heavier 2x10s and things like that that you're not seeing in the new lightweight style of construction there. And again, with going back to the Kohl's, like you said, it's either type 2 or type 1. Again, anybody that was on the DEMCON fire, again, that's a type 2 building. It's sprinkler protected, but of course, when you shut off those systems, and they're not working properly, you're going to have the potential for failure, right? Anytime that those structural members are actually getting that heat that they're not intended to be receiving, they're going to start failing. So that's when you're going to get some of those steel roof trusses either pushing outwards. So anytime you have those tilt slab walls, as those steel beams and trusses heat up, they can expand, which can start to push some of those tilt slabs out and create collapse. Same with these masonry walls. They can start to fail as well. And then you can also have the steel roof collapse into the interior, which huge fuel loads inside of there that are just going to keep burning underneath that steel structure. So really, we want to hope that everything is working as they're designed on those types of buildings. And as long as they are, they should be fairly safe and easy buildings to work in. But we need to be able to monitor and ensure that things are happening as they are designed. Because when those designs don't work towards us anymore, that's really where you're going to get a lot of trouble and failures and situations that we don't want to be working in. John, I see you checking in.
Yeah, on those type 2s, one of the other challenges when you're inside is as that metal roof structure expands and starts pushing out on the load-bearing walls, if we come in with water and start hitting those structural members and cooling them rapidly, they can actually start to contract and can actually pull away from the supporting walls. I watched that happen in a commercial fire some years ago, that the attack crew got in, started playing water up towards the ceiling, and an entire section of the roof collapsed after they hit it with water.
Well, I think you're absolutely hitting on the point. I mean, that's, these types of buildings, they're designed to not be under fire load. They're designed to be protected from that. And when they have to start enduring that and dealing with the heat and then also the rapid cooling, it's going to follow the things that metal typically does. Metal expands when it heats and it contracts when it cools. So it's not designed to go through that rapid and varied movement under a normal condition. So when it does do that, you're going to get failure of these buildings. So really being mindful, and like you said, even if we are in what we think is controlling it, you could still have the potential for some collapse. So you really do need to be very cautious in some of these buildings that are designed to be safe. But if those designs aren't working for us, we need to be aware of that and start taking account of what we need to do to take the next steps to protect ourselves. So. That is really all I had. So you could obviously tell a lot of the videos I stole from YouTube were from the UL Firefighter Safety. They have a ton of really great content on there. A lot of really short videos that are to the point. So if there's a subject that you like and you want to get onto, there was a lot of really good information. Dale G. Peckel, he's the one that I kind of stole that Fireground size up and reading smoke. Obviously Dave Dodson, he's the one that really is the kind of the father of reading smoke and got all the information on it. But Dale did a pretty good job with that as well. There was another video that I didn't show. It's just too long and there's just too much information in it. But basically it was Governor's Island in New York. There was a huge study done out there. They had a ton of row houses that they did a ton of different experiments and burns in. And it really showed like what happens if we vent first, what happens if we spray from this side, what happens if we do this, and it's very good to kind of see how the effects of firefighting and tactics have on that interior environment. And they were able to do it over and over and over again because they had a ton of these houses that were built very similar. So if you're ever interested, it's a good link to follow. I'll send this this PowerPoint out to everyone later this week, so you're still able to get to any of these links if you didn't get to see a good video or you want to have access to it, so that will be sent out.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend the Governor Islands one. Those are really good videos to watch.
Okay, good. Yeah, I thought it was a really good, really well put together, and it's through people that you can trust. I mean, it's UL, NIST, IAFF, they all kind of played a part in that Fireground consideration. So, really good content on that. So, and there's a ton of other ones out there. I tried to find the ones that I thought were most relevant to what we were talking about today. We don't do a lot of these classroom style drills, but I did find it important for us to kind of go back to some of this is very basic. Some of it is just a reminder, but I think it's good for us to go through this every once in a while and just kind of get a good grasp on what we're trying to do day in, day out with some of these fires and what the fires are trying to do to us. So I'll leave it open if anybody has anything they want to talk about. We can talk about it now. Otherwise, please send me any feedback that you got with this, because like I said, if we have to do any more of these classroom styles of drills, this is probably going to be the way that it'll be done. So any feedback that you have on how to improve it or keep doing something that was good, let me know, because like I said, this is only the second time I've run through this, so I'm still willing to learn.
Great class, Chad.
Thanks, Chief.
Yes,
Appreciate
went
that.
very good. Very well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. It was a good class. We can teach the old guy some new stuff.
Anytime we can do that, that's it's successful then, right? Thank you.
Hey, Chad, this is Charlie.
Yeah. I
do have one note on those type 3 buildings. I've fought a number of fires in those buildings before, and a good portion of those had 2 or 3. When you went to go do vertical vent, there was oftentimes a new roof over an old roof, which pretty much becomes a loser at that point.
Sure, and I think we absolutely need to keep that in mind. Anytime that we have those older structures, you pretty much have to assume that you're going to have either remodels or overdos or whatever. And we've even seen that in a couple of houses where it's like, wait a minute, how many roofs are on this and what happened here? But I think that's a great point on that type 3, and then just anything that's kind of older construction that you're going to have some of those modifications to.